Alright, welcome back everyone to another guitar unboxing, but this time it's really something special. It's what's been missing from a wall of guitars right here, because I've got a Strat, I've got a Tele, and no guitar wall is complete without a Les Paul. But not just any Les Paul, it's an Epiphone, so you know. Alright, so hold on to your seats. Why is this broken? How should I hang it up to my wall if it's like this? Alright, I figured it out, you guys. Says it right here. Epiphone inspired by Gibson. So it's by design. Guess we have to glue it then. Okay, so of course I knew the headstock was broken. I found this on eBay. A music store was selling this for cheap as damaged goods, and luckily the break is quite clean. It has large areas of bare wood, so I'm thinking this could easily be rescued by gluing it back together. Also, luckily the fretboard and binding is completely unharmed, and by the way, this is what the rest of the guitar looks like. I lightly clamped the guitar to the desk so it wouldn't shift around. And here on the side we see there's a small piece of wood missing. Here we will use a 2K wood filler. I get everything ready, a PVA glue, the 2K wood filler, some clamps, some surgical tubing, and also I have Microballs. I start mixing the 2K wood filler and I add some of the Microballs, which are tiny glass spheres that almost weigh nothing. This is an additive for resin to make it lightweight, because I just want to fill this gap and it shouldn't be heavy. And I apply it to the area with the small gap. Everywhere else I put PVA glue on both sides. I put masking tape around the truss rod, because it still should be easy to rotate in the end. Then during this part I realized there's some lumps in the PVA glue. I guess it's getting old. I should think about replacing it. And I'm cleaning up the glue that got on the truss rod with a hobby knife. And I attach the first piece and I clean up the squeeze out with a paper towel. Then I apply PVA glue on the remaining areas and do a cleanup again, and clean up the truss rod area again. No! Okay, I thought it would be funny to leave this in. Luckily nothing got damaged. Just the headstock was heavier than expected because the tuning pegs are still attached. So I applied some fresh glue and put the pieces back on. And this time I'm holding it with a clamp. And this is where an actual mistake happened. I didn't realize it at the time, only later on when watching the video footage. When I tightened the clamp, the pieces slightly shifted. But I didn't realize it until later, so I kept on going. And then I start wrapping surgical tube around it. Because the back of the neck is round, I thought wrapping surgical tube around it will work better than clamps to hold it all together. But I also added some clamps just to be sure. And here's the result. Also, I kept rotating the truss rod from time to time, just to make sure that the glue wouldn't hold it in place. And then I let it cure for several hours. At this time I started watching the video footage and I realized that the part slightly shifted when I clamped it on. I just had to take a look. So I removed the clamps and the tube, and luckily it wasn't as bad as I thought. Most of it was glued seamlessly except for this area here. But there's clearly also some clear coat missing. And when looking from the side, you can see that this wedge-shaped part also went all the way in there. However, I've been thinking what I could have done differently, and I've thought of maybe it would have worked to use this glass fiber reinforced tape and then only use surgical tubing. And now it's one day later. I take the tubing off and I was still paranoid, so I checked the neck thickness again with a ruler, but it was alright. I test fit the nut and I noticed there's a small part of bare wood showing. So I covered it up with a black lacquer pen. Then I put the strings back on, but very lightly. I didn't tune up to pitch at all yet. And luckily I was able to reuse the strings that the guitar came with, which are Gibson strings, so you can play relatively authentic. Now it's time to cover up the cracks, and I use red alcohol ink, which is very thin and it flows into the cracks nicely. And I'm also doing the sides. Here 1 drop of ink rolled down to the other side of the neck and some ended up on the binding, but the alcohol ink is easy to clean up with some isopropyl. While I wait for the ink to be dry, I'm sanding down the nut a bit for low string action. Then I'm doing some scuff sanding and I start to apply some Solarez grain filler to fill all the cracks in the clear coat. This product is called I Can't Believe It's Not Laquer, and it's a UV curing resin. And I use a cheap UV lamp. This one was intended for fingernail art, but we will use it for the UV resin. However, this resin gets really hot at the very first moment. So in the beginning I used the lamp just for a short moment and I let it cool off, and then I use the lamp for about 1 minute. I fill all gaps and cracks from all sides and cure it, and I repeat the process until everything is nicely filled. Then before level sanding, I also took the guitar out in the sunlight for a few minutes until I started level sanding with an 800 grit sanding stick, and I continued up to 1200 grit. Off camera I made the mistake of using a wet rag to wipe off the dust, and some of the water must have crept in through the cracks. And this left some discoloration where the red paint is getting pale. So I need to make sure to avoid wet rags in the future. Then I apply a final thin coat of the Solarez product over the whole area, cure it again, and then I go over it with automobile polish and a polishing pad. Then I check if everything is even, because when playing a guitar you don't want any weird unevenness on the neck. What's left to do is gluing on the nut, and I add some graphite with a pencil into the nut slots because, 3x3 headstocks, they can have some tuning issues, and the graphite will help the strings slip through the nut slots. Alright, time to tune up. Alright, so it is a guitar. Of course, this could be done a lot better, but that was the simple and quick version. So when the neck break or headstock break is like a scarf joint, you can simply glue it, and then there's no need to make the complicated routed version. Actually, I've tuned it up many times before and I played it for several days and there were no issues and tuning stability is normal. Maybe in the distant future I will refinish this one and then I will do a nicer cover up of the break area. But until then, I'm glad I bought this one and brought it back to life. It's a quite nice Les Paul. Then, quick review. I really like the 50s neck. It's not huge, but it's not so tiny. The 50s neck is a bit larger and I like large necks. Most modern guitars, I think, have a too thin neck to be comfortable. Because, the thumb, you have lots of reach, it doesn't need to be thin. Unless for people who like to play with the thumb on top. Epiphone is making the 50s and the 60s standard Les Paul, and I think the 50s has a nicer neck, but the 60s has better pickups or more modern. I think those are too mellow, but maybe one day I'll put different ones in. Alright, so that's it for today. I hope this was useful or entertaining at least, and see you next time.